What's up, guys? Colton, Lindsay coming at you live on the WGR Live. This is my own Facebook channel where I get to say whatever I want to whoever I want, with whoever I want. I'm going to have a good old friend of mine, Mr. Ben Gochberg, on today. What's interesting about him is how would you like to be financially free by the age of 27? And really, what is the definition of financial freedom? It's really where your passive and or residual income pays for your desired lifestyle. So we're going to talk with him today about that. As soon as I can see him, oh, there he is, pippity popping him on. I'm going to bring him on.
Watching the replay, start to hit that share button, and down below, because I know a lot of you are on your mobile device, turn on your notifications for future live streams. Ben, you're on. How are you, my man? What's going on?
Hey, how are you?
Can
Colton?
you hear me?
Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you. You guys watching, can you hear us? Put a 100 in the comments if you can hear us, and start to add people. Okay, cool. Ben, here we are. Just so you know, I appreciate you being here. I'm excited to talk. I know we say we're going to do this for a minute. So we're here now. So let's start it off. 90 seconds. Let's get into it. What in 90 seconds, how did you get to where you're at today, my friend?
Well, first of all, I think there's lots of other people out there who can offer some advice on what it takes to be successful, and they're a lot more capable than I am. But to get to where I am now, I ended up serving an LDS mission in my early 20s. And when I got back home, I did what I thought was the next best step and went and got a job at a bank because they would back up my academic scholarship at university. So went out, got a job. I ended up working for that bank for about 10 years. And during that period of time, I had a couple of things shift in my life. And I realized that about the time I was 25 or 26, that I couldn't do that for 40 years. And beyond that, I realized that there were a lot of opportunities out in the world to be able to structure my life the way I wanted to. And so I became very experimental, and I experimented with about half a dozen businesses. Actually, Colton, do you remember when I was exchanging gold back in the day, a handful of years ago?
Yeah, I do. I sold you some gold. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. So we did well with that, but, you know, the market changes. And, you know, after about a half a dozen attempts in different businesses, I've struck on a couple of ideas that are continually working. And because it's
What year was that? Hold on. What year was that you did the gold? Was that 2011, 2012?
I think.
Was that before the gold market crashed or after?
Yeah, it was beforehand. So we were exchanging gold between about 2009 and 2012. And
what?
Over that, yeah.
That long ago? Holy crap. I didn't realize it.
Yeah, we figured out that we could train like a group of college students to run around and negotiate these deals on my behalf, and then I would go and show up and buy the gold and get the margin when it was sold to a refiner. So, yeah, we did that. I ended up meeting a guy who's now my best friend in the world. His name's Chase, and he got me into property flipping when I was 24. I had lived pretty frugally, and so I gave him a chunk of money. We went and flipped a property, and we purchased a property in Central Ogden for $46,000 and flipped it for $105,000, like in 90 days. You know, some ridiculous thing. And from there, we've done a couple other things. So we have a regional environmental business that handles mold and a whole bunch of other contagion issues. And I'm currently in the process of working with a couple of partners to miniaturize a technology that would allow a hospital to sanitize a space without manual labor, basically using an aerosol space to clean a hospital facility. So lots of cool stuff happening.
That's way cool. So let's go back into time, because here's what I've known you since probably middle school would be my guess.
Yeah,
right?
We went
Syracuse
to
middle school.
Mm-hmm.
Right, which is crazy because out of middle school, you're one of few people I talk to still. So that's an interesting little fact right there.
I think we were both pretty much outcasts in middle school. I didn't really like that.
No, but
me more so than you. You became the cool kid. I grew up just to be the chubby kid.
Oh, I became cool kid. See that?
Yeah.
You get to put these earbuds in these glasses, you become cool instantly. I love it. So, you know what I most remember from you was in middle school is that you were the Jewish kid, right? Am I making this up, or you were Ben the Jew? That's what I remembered you as.
Yeah. So I mean, my dad was Jewish, and I grew up LDS.
Okay.
But it was always kind of part of our family, I guess more part of our background, claiming it as part of our background than anything else. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So then you went, you grew up LDS then. I think it was your email, Ben's a Jew. Maybe that's what it was that I remembered, right? So you go on to an LDS mission, and then you come home and you take a job with Wells Fargo. 10 years into it, or maybe not even 10 years into it, you realize this just isn't going to work for me to create life on my terms, right? So while you were working at Wells Fargo, what were some big financial, I guess, things that you learned either from some wins you had or some losses you had during that time frame of working with a banking institution?
Sure. So I can name at least one huge loss that had a huge impact. About the time I was 23 years old, me and a couple of buddies found a real estate investment group that was operating here in northern Utah. And the guy who was at the top of this group, his name was Ray Morris, and he was pretty slick. He said he was doing some things that it turned out he didn't really end up doing. And the returns were tasty enough for us to give him some money, but I was too dumb and too young and too naive to realize that I was getting drawn into something that was going to be a big deal. And he ended up taking hundreds of millions of dollars from this community in northern Utah. I had about a $60,000 loss in that little Ponzi scheme. And that was, when I was 23. So this was a large amount of money for me to lose at a relatively young age and start over saving. And that was money I had saved by working at the bank and working at nights serving tables. So it wasn't like it was easy to come back from. So that loss probably made me more savvy than any of the minor successes that we've had since then.
What's interesting is most people that create success financially and create financial freedom, they typically have something like that when they're younger. I know it happened to me when I was 22, 23 years old. I didn't lose money in a Ponzi scheme, but I did lose money in a spec home, right? If you remember 2007, I was in a deal 350, sold it for 270, so 80K. But those kinds of lessons, they teach you, right? Like it's an $80,000, $60,000 lesson that sets you up for the future, right? So at the time, it sucked, but how is it grace for you, right? Like what has it done for you since then? What was some major lessons you learned from that kind of failure, temporary defeat?
I was way more trust oriented after that whole debacle than I had ever been before in my life. I mean, in business school and in every business book you'll ever read, they harp on relationships being the real currency. And I've always accepted that, but it wasn't until I realized that it was really the ability to trust other people and have relationships that you could count on consistently that were the source of making money, and not just making it, but also protecting yourself from all the crazy people out there. But that was the big thing, is just learning that trust really is important.
Yeah, so let's just ask you the question. $60,000 invested. Did you have any collateral at all, or was it you thought there was great returns and you were hoping you were going to get the money back?
No, we had a promissory note, right? But
oh, that's good. Promise.
It doesn't matter. Yeah, it doesn't matter when it's fraud. So when the SEC finally jumped in and broke up that whole scheme, they froze tens of millions of dollars that he had in assets. But to sort that out, it took years. And I was one of the smallest fish in that pond, right? There were people that had lost significantly more. And so they were paid out first as a percentage of losses. I think he went to prison for 5 years. I don't know what's happening now, but I'm just glad it's over. I'm glad that
you learned your lesson.
Better. Yeah.
Yeah, I just got a call on Thursday or Friday. It was from a guy in Santa Ana, California. He is the federal public defender for a past client of mine that is facing 9 counts of mail and wire fraud, right? So, like, here's the real deal, guys. If you're going to take people's money and invest it, do what you say you're going to do and make it very clear on the risk that's involved, because I think so many times you start thinking kind of stupid when you're losing your shorts, right? So just don't think stupid with other people's money is my point there. Okay, so fast forward, you're 24, 25 when you left. When did you leave the bank? What age?
I left the bank when I was, it's been a long time ago now. I think I was 30 when I finally actually did leave.
Okay.
But I was
25 to 30 was the gap then. You had a gap when you realized you weren't going to be there to when you left. Okay.
Right. Yeah, I was pretty aggressively acquiring real estate. I was using so the first strategy was I got an FHA, I rented out rooms to roommates, and then I'd leap with another FHA into another property once I could conventionally refinance out. And that's how I bought my first handful of properties. In the meantime, I had set enough capital aside so that I was continually doing some kind of real estate flip project, and usually those timelines were 6 months to a year of holding for those projects. And about the same time, I discovered a couple other businesses. This was the time when I started to really look at network marketing, understand network marketing. It's amazing how many people don't take the time to understand that industry. Man, it is an incredible way for somebody to become financially free if they'll just take the time to get it right in their head instead of listening to all the critics out there.
So let's talk about that. We'll come back to the timeline in a second, but tell me what you mean, because I get the power of network marketing if it's something that someone chooses and they get the model. But what is it that you think people are missing, and what is it do you think that they could gain from that opportunity there if they really did research a network marketing opportunity?
Okay. So most people, what happens is that most people fail to realize the value of a small chunk of money that's continually invested over time. So here's a great example just from what's happening in our country over the last 10 years. So during the recession, most of the people that went bankrupt would have been saved from bankruptcy with an additional $500 to $700 worth of cash flow coming in from somewhere. That would have been enough to get them through. If you look back historically, since 1970, wages in the United States have remained stagnant as a percentage of total income, while the return on capital for those that have capital and choose to invest has continued to go up. Thomas Piketty, who's a French economist, he actually talks about this in his book, Capital. The real rate of return on capital over the past 100 years or so has increased, but right now it's returning between 4 and 6% on average. While the national GDP, like last year, for instance, we're probably going to end up at a GDP number that's maybe, I don't know, 2.7, 2.8. So those with capital continue to increase their capital at a higher rate than those who are trusting the economy and the GDP to produce results. And if you consistently invest a chunk of money, you can very, very quickly move to a place where it's much more comfortable to live. For instance, if you max out a Roth IRA this year, I think you can contribute $5,500. That comes out to be like $448 a month in savings. Someone who does that over the space of 5 or 10 years has probably accumulated enough capital so that over the next 10 years or 20 years, they'll likely put themselves in a position to be a millionaire if they're willing to pay down debt and take the other steps necessary to do it. So for me, what most people don't understand about network marketing is that the average person can make enough capital where if they keep their initial job and invest the $300 to $500 a month, they can be financially free in the space of 10 to 25 years sooner than someone who is simply working and paying bills. Does that make sense? I explained that?
Yeah. So in a nutshell, what I understand is from other network marketers that are multi-millionaires as well, they have said within 4 to 5 years, really a person can use network marketing or sooner to create financial freedom, right? Where traditional investing is saying, hey, and even probably longer today with the way the economy is and the whole banking industry, we're looking probably 30 to 50 years for traditional investing to create that same type of financial freedom. So Let me ask you guys, how long would you like to wait? 4 or 5 years or 40 or 50 years to create your financial freedom? Right. So let's talk about...
I was just going to interject and say, it's so interesting. I think that sounds so cute, well, which are we going to pick? Are we going to pick do it faster or do it slower? But the reality is it really does take some gumption. It does take the right personality to go out there and get it. I do think everyone can do it, but I do think there are people that have acquired certain sets of skills and certain experiences that make them more naturally successful in that type of business. And so success there is possible for everyone, but you need to be introspective enough and willing to go through enough experiences that cause you to grow to be able to be long-term successful in that space.
What causes someone to grow, to get these kind of attributes? What is it? Is this like being an outcast, right? Like, is this just failures, like losing $60,000? Is it, I mean, what is it, right? Like, I mean, is there a specific pattern?
I think there is. And I've talked about this a lot because I try to manufacture it within myself. In fact, I think any professional sales guy, yourself included, you probably go through habits and rituals that put you in a zone to be able to take a lot of no's to get 1 or 2 or 3 yeses. I mean, how many phone calls do you go through on a daily basis when you're calling? Dozens, hundreds, a lot, you know?
Yeah, hundreds for sure. I mean, absolutely hundreds.
So that there has to be that process of getting a lot of no's, so you become desensitized to it so that you can go out and achieve something else. And I do think that having the desire naturally is better than manufacturing it. But that natural desire is, yes, it's a result of crisis. It's a result of not being accepted in certain ways. It's a result of trauma. And that's a blessing and a curse, right? Because then you've got to deal with the mental problems of deciding to be successful when history may tell a different story.
Yeah. Well, and you know what's, I teach this inside of any coaching program I do, any training program, specifically Financial Freedom Nation, is it's state management. Your emotional state, when time passes, it equals a state of emotion. Now, you can either come at it with a state of suffering and being a little bitch and crying about it and just come up with all the excuses of why it's stacked against you, or you can look at it as grace, as an opportunity, losing $60,000 in a Ponzi scheme and finding the nugget in that that's going to teach you and propel you forward. Right? But it is probably one of the most challenging things I've dealt with in my entire life, and yet it's the thing that I spoke with those rituals every single morning. I do whatever it takes to prime my emotion, to take it up a notch so that I can see things through those rose-colored lenses and make sure that I'm applying that, right? Applying those tendencies, because I think you and I have something very similar in the sense that we are not naturally talented in any way above and beyond anyone else. We just happen to continue forward when we get our ass kicked over and over again. I think that's something we have very similar.
I'll grind it out. And, you know, there are lots of people that are going to see this video who know exactly what I'm talking about. I know you do because you live in this area. But I think any young man or young woman that can go door to door and sell God, I mean, you want to talk about the hardest sale in the world. That's harder than vacuum cleaners. That's harder than anything else I've ever talked about in my life. And it comes down to, well, why are those people successful? It's because they honestly believe and have a core belief about what they're doing. And, you know, we go through those experiences that put us in a position to have a different perspective on trials later on. Yeah,
absolutely. So let's talk about that extra cash flow and the difference that someone, if they invest it differently, where do people get that extra cash flow? I mean, I talk about this cash flow management all the time. Where are you seeing that people can get the extra cash flow to get that slight advantage?
I think the easiest way on the market is, frankly, network marketing first. But I think the second and third easiest ways are learning enough about real estate so that you can structure a deal in which you get a piece of the income of a rental property without having to lay a lot of capital out for yourself. So I know a young man, I'll give a shout out to Joe. Joe, if you hear this video, this is about you. He put together a deal here in Tremont for a fourplex where he supplied very little capital, but supplied the expertise, put the deal together, and as a result is getting, you know, $300 to $500 of income from that transaction. He's also managing the properties, right? So for him, very low risk, high future return, and all he really needed was a lot of phone calls, a lot of looking around, and the right contacts to put a deal together.
Right. I think that's the biggest thing, guys. If you can put yourself into action mode, right? Like I'm working on a deal right now, $23,000 wholesale deal, right? And it's not because I was seeking that deal out. It's because I was putting in the effort and the deal was there. And I have 13 years of background now to say, yeah, this is a deal I want to take advantage of. Let's do it right now. Is it a win for the seller? Is it a win for me? Is it a win for the end buyer? Is everyone winning here? And then all of a sudden, boom, increased capital, $23,000. And $23,000 is I mean, if you had an extra $23,000, you guys watching, how would that help your life? How would that help you advance towards your financial freedom, right?
Well,
That's how I look at it.
absolutely. But you know what most people are going to do is they're going to go out and blow that 23 grand on a new car or a boat or a handful of nice vacations. Instead of thinking, okay, what percentage of this windfall can I go do something with and still enjoy other portions of my life, right? Because it's not about being a tyrant to yourself. It's not about crazy amounts of discipline. It's about think about what portions are appropriate for what you want to do and then go and portion it out instead of being all one way or all the other.
So what I hear you say when you say portion it out, I hear cash flow management. A dollar comes in, that dollar is going to go out some way. But if you can manage where it flows out into different kind of portions, or we call them accounts or buckets in Financial Freedom Nation, so that you're not spending all $23,000 on a new boat. Then beginning to spend that money on, putting percentage to your financial freedom account, putting maybe a percentage towards saving up for a new boat or a new vacation, putting a percentage towards giving it away, so you're sectionalizing it. So if anyone has questions on that, because we're going to talk about here in just a second, kind of the challenge of society not learning this. But if you have questions, send me a message. I'd love to help you learn that. I have a program specifically designed for that. So Ben, let's talk about that. Why? I mean, because did your parents teach you that? I don't know. Maybe your parents did. Mine did not teach me that. My parents taught me a lot of other awesome stuff, like work my ass off, but they didn't teach me that, right?
Yeah.
Where did you learn it from?
Both of my parents were financially aware of what the right things were to do. Execution is always different than knowledge, right? And and that's been the case for me. It's the case for a lot of people, and I think my parents are included in that too. But the place where I got most of my knowledge was actually from looking into, and it sounds really shallow, but when I was 20 or 21 years old, 22 years old, I just wanted to make money because I wanted to be independent. I wanted to have my own life. And so learning how to do that more quickly was a priority to me. And there was a period of time, probably 4 or 5 years, where it was my hobby thought, where I was thinking to myself, what can I do today to put myself in a better position financially? And I don't think that was greed motivated, but it certainly was motivated by a desire to be in control for myself in my own life rather than relying on other people.
Napoleon Hill teaches that in Think and Grow Rich. It's a burning desire to get whatever that is, right? To be rich, the burning desire. Growing up, I grew up religiously, went on a mission. I had the belief system that it was actually evil to be rich, right? Like rich people screw poor people over, or that if you chased after money or you went for money, that you weren't going to go to heaven, or it was going to be hard to go to heaven, right? That was the beliefs that I had.
And that's a doctrine that I think has been common among Christian thinkers for a while. And now, what's funny is we see the other side of the spectrum, which is also disturbing in its own way, right? Where we're preaching a complete gospel of prosperity, where the desire to be rich is appropriate regardless of anything else that's happening. I think it's a spectrum, right? You have to be somewhere.
Sounds a lot like the story of the Book of Mormon when you put it like that, Ben.
What?
They get rich and then they crash, and they get rich and then they crash, sure. Right? Yeah. Right? That's my point being, right? Like we live in a time, guys, I can't historically speaking of research and plus my own experience, right? I don't know if there's ever been a time here on the planet that's been so easy to create financial freedom. That's my honest opinion, right? But yet still a lot of people aren't creating the financial freedom, right? And it's typically because they don't have key principles like you're talking about to apply. They just aren't taught that. Why are not people taught that? And what do you think is going on with the system that's keeping people from learning this naturally?
Well, I think the country is moving towards a natural oligarchy. I think that by the year 2030, we're going to be in a time where most of the people that have money did not make it themselves. In fact, right now in the United States, we're going through the largest transfer of wealth in the history of mankind, baby boomers passing their fortunes to their children and grandchildren, which is wonderful. But Chase and I talk about this all the time, but have you ever seen a family business in the second or third generation after a patriarch or a matriarch passes away, and how there's just something off, there's something different that happens unless those kids are really well trained from a young age? Well, the presence of money changes the way people interact with the world around them, for better and for worse. And if you don't put the lessons in place before somebody has money, they're going to lose it. You know, lottery winners going bankrupt all the time, et cetera, et cetera. And I think we're going into a time when we're seeing fewer and fewer people go out and decide to make money because they know that when somebody dies, they're going to get money. And also because that generation, to a certain extent, has coddled our generation, mostly people younger than us.
Hell yeah.
But we've been coddled into believing that it's acceptable to just wander around for 10 years. If you don't know what you want to do for a living yet, that's okay. If you want to explore a little, explore a little bit, but don't explore for 10 years. Like, go get a trade, go make some money, and then explore. But you need to be an independent adult before you can start talking about how you want to go discover yourself, or take a year off and move to Thailand or something. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I totally get what you're saying. I mean, I took time. I went on a mission just like you. I was in Brazil. Where did you go?
I went to Toronto. I was assigned to speak Spanish.
Okay, speaking Spanish in Toronto. Wow, nice. So I also spent time in Thailand, traveling there. Before we had kids, me and my wife spent there. And
that's not why I
also
spent Thailand.
No, I'm not. I know. My point is at the same time, though, I had already made some money and lost some money when we did that, right? Like, I had already, I remember making $40,000 and then spending 50 in a month, right? Like, I was just stupid with my money. I remember getting high and losing money on Bodog.com, which is a fucking internet gambling website. Talk about being just stupid with your money, right? And all those experiences kind of stacked one after another to where it finally hit me that, wait a second, if I manage my state and I manage the time that passes and I manage the cash that flows through me, then the filter then is going to create something super epic. And then so I constantly spend time on adjusting these filters of time passing, of emotion passing, of money passing, right? And then I begin to become kind of an because we spoke about the word awareness, almost as if it's an expanded awareness. And then I can crystallize my thinking to create what it is that I want to create. But I didn't learn that in school. I didn't learn that in public education. And I personally believe that public education has been set up in such a way that it trains a blueprint. You call them beliefs or these lessons, right? Trains a blueprint on side of creating a working middle class that props up the wealthy, right?
Sure.
And I think that technologies, I can't tell if it's disturbing that or if it's just enhancing that problem, to be honest with you. I know it can disturb it, but I'm still not quite certain which way it's going.
Well, I think it highlights the extremes in every direction, right? Because you just see more of it going on. Let me ask you this, because you brought up an important point. You mentioned creating space for creativity, creating space for crystallizing an idea in your head. And something that I've bumped into is that I'm realizing now as a business person that I am a sprinter, in that I need a period of time of rest and preparation, and then I can work incredibly hard for a very short period of time. But if that goes longer than a week, a couple of weeks, I tend to get burnout pretty easily. So would you consider yourself more of a marathoner or a sprinter in business, and why do you feel that way?
It's a great question. I actually feel I'm a dancer, right? And here's what I mean by that is I think that there are times that you've got to sprint and times that you've got to pace yourself and marathon it, right? Like, I look at first 50 days of 2018 have been a sprinting marathon for me. It's what I felt like, right? I changed office spaces. I had a huge defeat with leaving my company to go open EXP, and join that company, which did not work out, and ended up actually launching our own brand, which turned out fantastic. I ended up dealing at the same time with lower cash flow. And if you guys are realtors, you know the cash flow has been down through the winter months. It's been one of the most challenging months at times we felt as realtors in a long time, because we had such huge gains previously, and then the inventory shrunk dramatically and sales dramatically shrunk. And so, I mean, to answer this kind of question is, I feel like I dance. I flow with the harmony of what needs to happen when the time needs to happen. But there's absolutely along the way, as I'm doing that sprint and trying to dance with those longer intervals that I need to sprint, is I must take time to manage my state. No matter where, or whether I'm marathoning or sprinting, I got to manage my state, and that's what's key for me, right? You might have just heard a gong in the background. That's my team setting appointment. So
awesome.
Just ignore that noise.
So I've realized something I've realized over the last handful of years is how important exercise is as part of my routine. I was much less disciplined with that in my early to mid 20s, and now I realize that it's a necessary thing for my mental acuity. It's necessary for my state, as you say, to make sure that I'm in good form when I actually do need to perform. I can't go without it. You know, if I go 3 or 4 days without doing something physically, then I get really bothered.
Yeah, it's all part of that. You know, I think at the end of the day, we don't know when we're going to die, but I anticipate going at least another 75, 85 years, hit 115 years. That's my take on it. I think people are going to start to live longer naturally as part of technology advancing. And I've got a gap between 33 and 115 years of age. How can I take care of this vehicle right here? And how can I enjoy that time frame, right? Like I see this, right? My parents are personally going through some major challenges right now with, my dad's got a sister just put in a nursing home. She's crazy, right? Watching the state kind of just suck any last dollars out that she has. And what my point is everyone has these challenges, right? These problems. I mean, think about it. You're probably 34, 35? How old are you, Ben?
I'm about to turn 34.
Right. So you're my age, 33. And has there ever been a time in your life when there hasn't been a challenge?
No.
Right.
No,
I've never seen everything is about a challenge. And so you're going to hit that next challenge. You're going to hit that next problem. How are you going to move through that problem? Are you going to be a bitch about it? Are you going to cry about it? Are you going to whine about it? You're going to let it stress the shit out of you, which that happens. I've been there, man. Right. And that's where then people turn to, is it drugs? Is it alcohol? Is it pornography? Is it food? Right. I think that's one of the problems with the Mormon church today. I'm not active in the church, but when I do attend those meetings for a baptism or whatever I'm invited to, everyone's overweight, man, right? And so they're turning to food. It's just true. I'm just speaking honest right here. I'm just being open, right? And they're turning to food for that emotional stress, right?
Yeah.
And so the question is how can I let that stress just flee me? And how can I create this void inside of me so that naturally, I call it God's love, you call it whatever the hell you want, but how can I suck that energy in that's just gratitude and positive emotion and love and abundance, right? You got to process that through the rituals that you spoke about, right? So let's, anything else on that topic before we kind of shift gears? That's a great topic.
No, I mean, I was going to make this comment to you that it's interesting. I'm looking for ways that I can preserve energy and preserve my integrity without having to go to extremes to make things happen. And one of the, yes, absolutely, nutrition is important. But one of the things I've bumped into is that, in my early career, I was very much a people pleaser, meaning I was actively trying to build relationships all the time with everybody. I was trying to make things happen all the time with everybody. And I got to a point where I realized I am a certain type of person, and I'm changeable. I mean, I can change who I am over time, but my core nature is to be introverted. It's to be academic. I'm a little bit more heady. And so I had to go out and find my tribe of people that related with my personality naturally. And you know what's funny is I exert a lot less energy when I work within my tribe, as opposed to constantly be trying to reach out and strive and establish some relationship with somebody that might be drastically different in the way that they live their life.
Yeah, that drastically different person oftentimes is known as an asshole as well. Usually is what that other person is. But my point being is with that is you're in a harmonic flow, right? You get into a harmonic flow when you're people with kind of that senses your energy. I call it energy. You're flowing with that. You're in that harmonic flow. And when you go outside of that, you begin to feel resistance. And it's typically because that their frequency is vibrating differently than your frequency, right? Not that one is right or wrong, but if you can start to attract to that likeness, and you'll be able to, you'll waste less energy, right?
Sure.
You'll less bandwidth into your brain. So moving forward, let's talk about the future of business, technology, finance, all of the above. I know actually some people, let me get one question. Someone had asked, what do you think about the current debacle that Wells Fargo is going through? I can't remember exactly what question they asked. Do you think they will be able to get back from their recent debacles? I don't even know what their debacles is, so maybe you do.
Sure. So it's not really a debacle. A couple of years ago, there was a lot of public attention around the fact that there were accounts that were being opened up without customer authorization. There were some credits that were being opened up without customer authorization. And while the bank took moves to remedy that, what it really highlighted was a larger cultural problem, that they had put so much pressure on their customer-facing salespeople that people were more driven to make sales than they were to be ethical. And this resulted in two things, one of them being pretty positive. One of them is that if you were a strong enough person to put up with it like I was, you built this incredibly loyal customer following that knows that you're going to do the right things. And a lot of those people followed me wherever I went. Like in business, they know what I'm doing, they know what's going on. But if you had a less strong personality and you were subject to pressure and to the whims of those pressures, it was an easy time for you to game and do some things that were inappropriate. So there were lots of people that lost their integrity, that made some bad decisions. I do think that they'll recover. I think they're one of the best run banks in the world. If I still bank with Wells. I don't think I could bank with too many other people because they operate in a way that's extremely predictable and convenient for the market. Do I think that banking is going to change in the next 5 to 10 years? Drastically. In fact, I think that every position I worked in within the bank during the time that I was there will probably have drastically different job responsibilities within the next decade.
So let's talk about that. And before we go there, I mean, HSBC, wasn't it just a couple of years ago, they got busted and indicted for laundering so much money from the drug cartel, right? Isn't that what was going on?
Yeah. So again, it was a face-to-face interaction with a customer-facing employee who was choosing to accept deposits on behalf of a drug cartel. But again, we're talking about individual decisions.
Right. I mean, at the same time, if I got a note passed across my desk that says, if you don't deposit that money, I will kill your family, and here's the pictures of them, I may be apt to take that deposit as well. I'm just speaking from my own experience, right?
Sure.
So, but they're still in business. HSBC hasn't gone away, right? So you're going to have these challenges in any, I think, industry. And I mean, banking problems are not freaking new, right? Look at the subprime mortgage meltdown and what shit was going on there, right? And no one's really held accountable. I think the lesson to learn from that is to know that shit's going to happen. How can you best structure your strategies in a way that's going to protect you, right? Because it's not going away, but you've got to still deal with it. So let's move forward. Ben, you're talking, why is the banking industry going to change over the next 5 to 10 years in those positions? What do you mean by that?
Well, the people that I call real bankers, ones that are creating large credits and actually looking at books and doing analysis, they have to have a level of judgment to be able to know whether or not they can trust the customer that they're talking to. That will never go away. But the manner in which that connection is made and how many of those relationships a banker fields will go up. So I think we're going to see larger default rates as the workload continues to increase on bankers in general. But beyond that, I think you'll see more and more of the work that they do become remote. And I think you'll see less and less brick and mortar presence all across the industry. So I think it'll change among the lower level of employees, and you'll see professional bankers always in a role where they're facing a customer. But I think most of that's going to move online in the next 10 years.
Yeah, I think that it's already moving that way in any industry, right? I mean, we're seeing it inside of the real estate industry. You do real estate deals, and how often are you signing stuff from your iPhone in your truck going somewhere else, right? It's already moving that direction. How will cryptocurrencies be involved with banking into the future? Is that going to be something that we need to pay attention to, or what are your thoughts on that?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know enough about cryptocurrency to make a projection. I'd be scared if anybody took advice from me on this particular subject. What I am excited about is to see what changes do happen as a result of a decentralized banking system. I'm not going to get into too much about my beliefs concerning the Federal Reserve or any national bank, but you and I both know that that's the idea of factoring, the idea of centralized banking is not something that was ever intended by the founding fathers of our country. In fact, it was stringently and excitedly argued against for decades before anything ever got put into legislation. I would be really excited if the public became aware enough to go back in that direction. I think it would be an exciting time to be alive.
Oh my gosh, I'm stoked just thinking about it, right? You think about 1913 when the Federal Reserve got together, and I mean, all that was high wealth individuals saying, hey, we want to freaking have more control over everything with the Federal Banking Reserve, right? And then what's slowly unraveled the last 100 years has been terrible because there's no accountability, right? I mean, you take out the accountability, you go, who's holding the Federal Reserve accountable? Can we go monitor their books? Like, where does the money come from when we need to use quantitative easing that has allowed us to go 20-something trillion dollars into debt as a nation? So check out the book, guys, Creature from Jekyll Island. If you haven't, that will explain the history of centralized banking. And then check out a little bit about blockchain and understand what is decentralized banking and why it's so, I wouldn't say it's figured out, but it's so intriguing, the idea of decentralized. I can make a transaction with Ben from my Bitcoin account to his Bitcoin account, and guess what? It doesn't have to filter through PayPal. It doesn't have to filter through the government. It doesn't have to filter through a wiring system. It doesn't get monitored and controlled by the elite. Does that open up some challenges? Yeah, because I can now send you drug money, right? Like you can do that, right? But that's happening. HSBC is accepting drug money, right? So it's not like that shit's not already happening with the centralized system. So if anything, it opens up opportunity for the entrepreneur and those that think about freedom and think about how can we create a better humanity, in my opinion. That's my humble opinion. So,
and I think what you'll see, if you wanted to speculate a little bit, is I think we'll see a huge uptick in the adoption and excitement from the general investment community on cryptocurrency as soon as regulation starts to occur with some of the major currencies, which is something that not too many people are excited about. But if we can get syndication on a couple of currencies, I think you'll see the adoption rates go way up.
Yeah, and I think you're already seeing a couple of the exchanges. The regulation's coming, right? I think they're trying to set the stage of what does that regulation look like. So let's write the path so we can be involved with this regulation. I believe that we need regulation, right? You look at one of the number one frauds of 2017 was ICOs, the initial coin offerings, right? I mean, you could literally just say you're opening up an investment opportunity for this, and this, put together a website and start collecting money. I'm going to give you these tokens, right? And just deal, right? So it definitely needs regulated for sure. Okay. So let's talk about, before we wrap up, what are some key principles that individuals can apply immediately? I'm not talking like you don't need to be super smart. You don't need to be born in the right family. You don't need to be born in the right time frame or the right place, right? But some simple principles that are universal that anyone can apply to start moving towards financial freedom. And please define financial freedom as well. We haven't defined your version of financial freedom. So please do that.
You mentioned a definition that I liked when we first started talking a bit, which is, I believe that if you have sufficient to accommodate your standard of living without having to work in a regular 9-to-5 setting or work at all, meaning you could live indefinitely on your current passive or residual income, that is financial freedom. Now, the measure of that is in time, right? Because that's the only resource that we can't get more of. That's the real resource we're measuring. So that's my definition. is how much time you can live without having to actually take a paycheck from somebody.
So there you have it, financial freedom. So here's the question for you guys. How long could you go just living your day-to-day life, money flowing into you, and you do what you're doing before, like you don't have to work, right? So, I mean, imagine if you didn't go to work today or tomorrow, you had a job 9 to 5 or whatever, could you actually not go to work and still survive because you got money flowing in? Passive residual income, that's the name of the game. And we definitely weren't taught that in middle school. I guarantee you, not one person all through my public school, college, none of them taught me about passive residual income. Mm-hmm. So what are some key ways that these people can start to work towards creating that lifestyle?
I'm going to say something that's pretty unpopular, at least to a couple of people in my life, and that is that I think your ability to manage your emotions in relation to other people, whether that's in crisis or in success, is one of the most important attributes to being able to make money, because money is an emotional game for most people.
Yeah.
And it should not be. I mean, if you can remove a lot of the emotion. Now, okay, so the caveat is what we were talking about earlier, where we say you have to be in the right state of mind, in the right frame, and with the right feeling to be able to go out and execute on an idea. And I absolutely think that's true. But in most cases where we're talking about deal making, negotiation, sourcing clients, these should all be actions that leave out reacting emotionally to the other party. You should be trying to accommodate and relate emotionally to the other party.
Yeah. I think what he's saying, guys, here's a simple example, right? Is let's say you got $50,000 in the bank and it drops from 50 to 30. Don't let that fuck you up emotionally, right? And if you're dealing in a negotiation and someone tries to strong arm you or be an asshole or whatever, I'm using some stronger terms here, but if someone reacts like that, don't freak out, right? And if you happen to be extremely successful and make a bunch of money, don't go like you're the king of the world and let your ego get to your head, right? But stay in this flow, because money's not real. Money's just some digits on a screen, and it's a fun game to play. And if once you can figure out kind of a flow and make it work for you versus against you, you're always free with money. And then now you've got this time, and when you realize that time passing equals emotion, what emotion do I want to experience, right? In the moment that you begin to not experience, for me, peace, love, joy, abundance, prosperity, tranquility, when I'm not feeling that and I start to feel fear, doubt, worry, anxiety, frustration, hate, jealousy, any of that, I am beginning to become even more aware that, wait a second, I got to shift something fast, or I'm going to have miserable time passing with my next 80, 90 years here on earth. And Ben brought up the word discipline. And for me, I've never liked the word discipline. I never liked to be disciplined by my parents. I never liked this. I just hate it. Just has a negative feeling for me, right? But when I think about my patterns, some people call them habits. For me, though, I think about patterns over time. It becomes my friend or my worst enemy. Because if I have this pattern of negative suffering state, especially in regards to money, year after year for the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years, it's almost as I become oblivious that I'm living in a suffering state. And I'm not even aware of it, and I'm swallowed up into the gulfs of hell. Sure. I want to be in heaven. I want to be in paradise. So I love that. So managing your state in regards to money, maybe expand on that a little bit more on some key examples or how you actually do that in those situations. Sure.
So let's take an example. Real estate deals have a lot of numbers. There's a lot of digits in them sometimes. And a six-figure real estate deal, if you're not used to what that looks and feels like, it can be intimidating to someone who's doing it for the first time. If you're a brand new investor and you're looking at a 6 or a 7-figure deal, you can be worried about signing on the dotted line, and it can cause you to make mistakes, or even worse, it can destroy your credibility with the people that you're actually negotiating with and talking with, where it puts you in a position where if you had just kept your mouth shut and relaxed and taken a few deep breaths, you might have gotten the deal done instead of having to lose it to someone else who's just a little bit more in control of their emotional state. So I think that's an example that you and I probably deal with on a daily basis. Another
Absolutely.
thing that I'll point out about that is, do you ever remember $100 being a lot of money to you?
It's been a while, but yeah, I do remember that time frame, but it's been a while.
Yeah, it's been a while for me too, and I think
I
back
didn't used to walk around with a bunch of them in my wallet. That's for sure. When there's a lot of money to me.
I think that there's a comfort level that people need to achieve once they start doing larger transactions frequently, and what I mean by that is there is not a lot of difference in making an 8% margin on $1,000 or making an 8% margin on $1 million, as far as the work involved, the amount of time it takes to sign a contract, even the execution of that contract itself. I mean, you could use examples from different industries, but just for the sake of, if I went out, like we do mold, right? So I go out and do $1,000 mold jobs all the time. No big deal. Piece of cake.
Yeah.
For the average person to go out and sign a 7-figure deal, because it feels like a lot of money, they feel like there should be more involved than for that $1,000 transaction.
Mm-hmm.
But I actually will confess to you that my 6- and 7-figure transactions require less thought or the same amount of thought, less time or the same amount of time as my $1,000 transactions with individual consumers. And that's because as you move up, you're typically dealing with people that are more sophisticated, and it requires less emotion and less time. People are more prepared. People ask fewer questions on both sides because they know what's going on. You know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah, I absolutely do. Yep. Yeah, and so I was going to say for you realtors going forward, as we have technology disrupt our industry, I would suggest you target those types of clients that Ben's talking about, because they're going to continue to see your value and be much easier to work. It's the bottom feeder, bargain hunter bastards, I call them, that I don't want to do business with because there's emotion involved, right? I don't want to deal with their emotion. One of the things I always teach with my team is I don't care what the transaction is. Our real job is, number one, is manage my own state of energy and emotion. Number two is manage my client's state of emotion. It's managing the emotion and energy of the deal, right? It's always about managing that emotion. So I love it, man. So our time is definitely wrapped up, but you talked about your mold company. So local realtors, maybe, is it just local in the state of Utah, or is it other places people can work with you?
No, this is great. So this is important. So any of your realtor contacts, anyone that's a professional real estate investor, anyone in the medical industry that might be interested, what you need to know is that we provide a method of handling mold, bacteria, viruses, and some really nasty stuff like C. diff, E. coli, norovirus. We can typically do it in half the time that a regular remediation would take. We can typically do it without demolition, and we can typically do it at 50% of the cost of the industry. So, if you think about the average 2,500 square foot home, if there was a mold issue as a result of a hurricane, for instance, we just got back from Texas doing some homes down there in Texas. The average remediation for a 2,500 square foot home is in the tens of thousands of dollars easily, because they have to rip out walls, rip out insulation, treat the studs, sand the studs, paint the studs. We can do that whole process typically in the thousands of dollars for that much space, and typically we can execute on it in a single day. And we have teams that are available for dispatch that I can send pretty much anywhere west of the Mississippi, because we're licensed in pretty much every state, and we can help you on a project. And if you tell me that you came from Colton, we'll make sure you get a discount too.
Woo! Awesome. And I recently, I think you did some stuff, maybe a couple months ago, it seems like now, on one of my dad's houses, right? Didn't you guys do that basement, right? Did you guys do the mold stuff, or I think there was mold in that basement, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, we treated that basement in about 90 minutes completely, and then I think our guys also did the rebuild as well, didn't they?
Yeah, they did. Yeah, so that turned out pretty good. So awesome. So connect with Ben on Facebook, and then send a message if you have any questions. Ben, appreciate you being here. Let's talk more soon, okay?
Colton, it's great to talk to you. Thanks so much for the time. Talk to you later.
We'll see you.
Bye.
Appreciate you all being here today. I love bringing Ben on because I think he's probably one of the guys I've talked to the longest in my life. Not every day sort of thing, but since we were in middle school, we've kind of seen each other kind of go through this journey of life on kind of the outskirts of watching each other. And it's been cool to watch his success and watch what he's doing. But it's also kind of been a statement for me that you can create financial freedom no matter what the industry is or who your background is or where you came from. Anyone can do it, right? And I want to encourage you guys to do that. Do not wait to create financial freedom. Start right this freaking moment. And the biggest takeaway from this conversation is number one, is it starts with filtering your cash flow management, right? If you guys have any questions on that, that's why I launched Financial Freedom Nation Jumpstart program. I created that simply to help people, not to make a lot of money off it. It's done fantastic, and it's made me some money. It even helped some of our students. One of our students, because of it, she then went and did some things that she made 50 grand in about a 6-month period on top of what she was already doing, right? It's helped some of our students save $7,000 to $8,000 from their taxes. We talk about tax-free wealth, right? So I think that's number one, is manage your cash flow. Number two is we talk a lot about, which is state management. Manage your emotion in the deal, manage your emotion in life, manage your emotion with challenges, manage your emotion, especially with money. That's pretty much the second thing we really talk about Financial Freedom Nation as well, is the state management aspect as you're going through that. If you guys have any questions, reach out to me. I want to help you guys. Also, we just really basically barely launched the Prospecting Alliance. What that is it's a specific group specifically designed to help you take your real estate sales prospecting to a whole nother level by accountability. You will improve your skill set. You will improve your delivery, but you're not going to do it just because of role plays. You're going to do that because you put more time on task. You get more no's. You hear more objections. You hear more scenarios, and you improve and learn on that. And what the Alliance is set up to do is twice a month, we have accountability calls in which we're going to be helping these discoveries of what are the learning lessons and how can we apply that moving forward for the next 7 to 14 days to grow our prospecting, because prospecting is what drives your business. That's $47 a month. Plus, we're going to help you create accountability groups going forward for every single week. And you're going to have access to all the recorded versions of it as well inside of a private or a login. You get a username and login. I don't know how that works. My man Greg does all that. Also, if you guys want the whole kit and caboodle to build your real estate sales business, go to fearlessagent.com. Send all your buyer and seller referrals to me here in Utah, and get a hold of Ben. Appreciate y'all being here. Thanks for being here. Drop an L in the comments if you watch live, and if you watch the replay. Make sure to like, comment, share, and turn on your notifications. See you guys.